Hey y'all, it's Kim. So I asked Chat GPT to just give me 1,000 word overview of the chapters of Genesis 4 through 6. Uh, I hope you will indulge me while I go through this. I feel like this is one way to help spread Charlie Kirk's message, but through the scriptures. I mean, I know he's got other things that he did and talked about, but this is just my little contribution to the world to make things maybe a little better or introduce people to concepts that maybe they never knew. Um, I should have been doing this anyway. As a Christian, my husband was a preacher and that kind of stuff. So I should have just done better overall. I mean, I'm just making a confession here as far as that. But anyway, so introduction, Genesis 4 through 6 continues the story of humanity after the expulsion from Eden, tracing the first murder, the growth of civilization, and the increasing spread of sin that leads to divine judgment. These chapters bridge the idyllic world of creation with the catastrophic flood narrative that begins in chapter 7. They explore human freedom, moral choice, the escalation of violence, and the paradox of human potential for both greatness and depravity. Chapter 4, Cain, Abel, and the First Murder. After Adam and Eve are expelled from Eden, the narrative focuses on their children, Cain and Abel. This chapter explores the deepening effects of sin on human relationships and society. Cain and Abel's offerings. Cain becomes a farmer and Abel a shepherd. Each brings an offering to the Lord. Abel offers the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions, while Cain offers fruit from the ground. God looks with favor on Abel's offering, but not Cain's. The text does not fully explain why, but Abel's sacrifice is often interpreted as being offered in faith, Hebrews 11:4, or of a superior quality. And I also believe it has to do with the shedding of blood in order to have forgiveness, just like Christ went to the cross. And because of his bloodshed, that's how we're able to how we're able to get forgiveness from God. But you also have to do certain things in order to come to the Lord. So it's just like, okay. But anyway, we'll get into that at some point, I'm sure. So Cain is very angry and his face falls. It says his countenance fell. So he's got a sad look on his face. So God addresses Cain directly, warning him that sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. This is the first explicit mention of sin as an active force seeking to dominate humanity, but also the first statement that humans have the power to resist it. So, number two, the first murder. Instead of heeding God's warning, Cain lures Abel into a field and kills him. The first murder in human history. When God asks where Abel is, Cain replies with the famous line, "Am I my brother's keeper?" God confronts him with Abel's blood crying out from the ground, symbolizing divine awareness of injustice. Cain's punishment. Cain is cursed from the ground and destined to be a restless wanderer. Fearing vengeance from others, Cain is given a protective mark by God, an act of mercy preventing others from killing him. Cain then leaves God's presence and settles in the land of Nod. Cain's descendants. The genealogy of Cain lists the first builders of civilization, city building. Enoch city, animal husbandry is Jabal, music is Jubal, and metalwork is Tubal Cain. Uh, let's see, culture advances, but moral corruption grows. Lamech, a descendant, boasts of killing a man for wounding him and declares that his vengeance will be 70 folds or 77 folds, excuse me, a chilling escalation of violence. In the birth of Seth, the chapter closes with Adam and Eve having another son, Seth, whose line becomes associated with calling on the name of the Lord. This contrast between Cain's line, marked by violence, and Seth's line, marked by devotion, sets up the genealogies of chapter 5. The chapter 5, the genealogy of Adam. And if you ever go through the Bible, obviously there's a lot of genealogies, but it matters to the Jewish lineage. So anyway, sometimes you get a little bit bogged down when you're reading it, but at the same time, it's some of this stuff is pretty important, and especially to know where somebody came from, especially once you get into like the well, when the Israelites are wandering in the wilderness and going to war and that kind of stuff. Anyway, so chapter 5, the genealogy of Adam. Genesis 5 provides a formal genealogy tracing Adam's line through Seth down to Noah. This chapter serves several purposes. It links early humanity with Noah, emphasizes God's blessings of fruitfulness, and highlights the universality of death. And it also shows how long the people lived then. The image of God. The genealogy begins by restating that humanity was created in God's likeness, male and female, and blessed. This is a reminder that despite sin's entrance, humans still bear divine image. The death formula. Each entry follows a formula. A patriarch lives a certain number of years. Fathers a son, lives more years, and then dies. The repeated refrain, and he died, drives home the consequences of sin, like Genesis 2:17. Human life is long, often several hundred years, but death is inevitable. Enoch, the exception. One figure stands out. It's Enoch, who walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Instead of dying, Enoch is taken directly into God's presence. This brief note introduces the idea that fellowship with God can transcend death, a glimmer of hope amid the grim march of mortality. Introduction of Noah. The genealogy concludes with Lamech fathering Noah, saying, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief. Noah's name is a play on the Hebrew word for rest or comfort, hinting that he will play a redemptive role in God's plan. So, chapter 6, the corruption of humanity and God's grief. Genesis 6 serves as a transition from human genealogies to the flood narrative. It reveals how far humanity has fallen and introduces the character of Noah as the righteous man through whom God will act. The sons of God and the Nephilim. The chapter opens with the mysterious account. The sons of God saw the daughters of man were attractive and took them as wives. Interpretations vary. Some see these sons of God as angels, others as rulers or descendants of Seth intermarrying with Cain's line. The offspring, called Nephilim, are described as mighty men of renown. Regardless of interpretation, the passage conveys the idea that boundaries established by God are being violated, resulting in corruption and violence. God's response. God declares that his spirit will not contend with humanity forever, limiting human lifespan to 120 years. This represents a reduction of longevity, and an impending judgment. Humanity's wickedness. Verse 5 is stark. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. This verse emphasizes the total corruption of human society. Sin is not an isolated act, but pervasive in thought and desire. Divine grief and judgment. God is described as grieved into his heart and sorry he made man. An anthropomorphic, had to sound it out, expression showing that God's judgment flows from moral sorrow, not arbitrary wrath. He resolves to blot out humanity along with animals, birds, and creeping things. Noah finds favor. Amid this bleak scene, Noah stands out, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. This verse introduces the man who will be the instrument of salvation for humanity and creation. His righteousness becomes the foundation for the coming flood story. Theological themes from across Genesis 4 through 6. The escalation of sin. The narrative moves from disobedience in Genesis 3 to murder in Genesis 4 to societal corruption, Genesis 6. Sin spreads outward, affecting families, cities, and the whole earth. God's justice and mercy. God judges Cain but spares his life. God decides to bring the flood but also preserves a remnant through Noah. Human culture and creativity. Even in a fallen world, humans invent music, tools, and cities, showing the persistence of God's image. Hope through a righteous line. Seth's descendants, especially Enoch and Noah, represent a faithful line through which God's purposes will be carried forward. God's emotional engagement, and God is not indifferent. He warns, speaks, grieves, and responds to human behavior. And then the conclusion of it. So Genesis 4 through 6 paints a sobering portrait of humanity's early history. Violence, death, and rebellion proliferate, but God's purposes are not thwarted. The narrative balances judgment with mercy, tracing a line of hope through Seth and Noah. By the end of chapter 6, the stage is set for the cataclysmic flood, which will both cleanse the earth and provide a fresh start for creation. And then it just said, you like our infographic? And I said yes. So this just kind of tells you basically what we just read. I mean, so Genesis 4, Cain and Abel, Cain's offering rejected by God. Cain kills Abel in the field. Curse and mark of Cain. Cain's descendants, civilization, beginnings, and then birth of Seth. Genesis 5 is the genealogy of Adam. Adam's line through Seth and Noah. Long lifespans and death refrain. Enoch walks with God and introduction of Noah. And then Genesis 6, the corruption of humanity, the sons of God and Nephilim, great wickedness on the earth, and the Lord grieves and plans judgment, and Noah finds favor with God. So anyway, let's see what this other one said. I think it was another, oh yeah, this is just kind of a same overview. But anyway, hopefully you got a little something out of it. I mean, I would encourage people to go and actually read their Bible, study it out. I mean, I know this is just like a high overview. I wanted to just start this series and see if anybody shows any interest in it. Because I know I need to get back into reading. And also, I do listen to the Bible like I did Matthew 6 through 10 this morning. But anyway, you know, hopefully it helps give you a little bit of an introduction to the Bible if you're not familiar with it, whatever. But I will talk to you later. Have a great afternoon. Bye.